Marshal, what the hell are they doing?
Flying the streets to witness the greatest drivers on earth in a race.
It's still on, and we're going. Cyrus sent an emissary this afternoon to make sure.
You know where Emerald Lead is? What are you doing? No! I'm a human being from the planet Earth!
Safe.
This time you got it wrong.
1970s. Action movies. Too weird to forget. In 1975, over 80% of action movies bombed at the box office. Yet today, those same failures are worth millions in cult movie merchandising. What happened? How did the decade's biggest disasters become its most beloved treasures? We're about to reveal which rubber monster was actually a Volkswagen in disguise, find why one space opera made Star Wars look realistic, and check out the shocking reason Quentin Tarantino named his company after a failed revenge thriller. But first, you need to know about the Gang movie, so violent it caused real riots in theaters.
The Furies.
The Warriors. 1979. You're a gang member in New York City, falsely accused of murder, and you have to cross 4 boroughs while every other gang in the city wants you dead.
Dig it!
Sound like a nightmare? For director Walter Hill, it sounded like the perfect comic book movie, and that's exactly what The Warriors became. Michael Beck leads a leather-clad gang trying to make it home to Coney Island while being hunted by themed gangs that look like they stepped out of a fever dream. We're talking about the Baseball Furies, face paint and Louisville Sluggers, the high hats, top hats, and murderous intentions, and the Lizzies, leather-clad femme fatales. The whole thing plays like a neon-soaked urban western with more style than sense. Critics in 1979 were genuinely concerned. They called it dangerously violent, irresponsibly glamorizing gang culture, and a cartoon masquerading as social commentary. Real gang violence broke out at some screenings, leading to the film being pulled from theaters. It was seen as exploitation at its most reckless. But that comic book aesthetic was exactly what made it work. Hill wasn't trying to make a realistic gang movie.
I want them all. I want all the warriors.
He was creating a stylized urban myth, the theatrical gang costumes, the ritualistic dialogue, and that iconic "Can you dig it?" speech all served to transform New York into a playground of archetypal warriors fighting for survival. Today, The Warriors is recognized as a masterpiece of style over substance cinema. Its influence can be seen in everything from Grand Theft Auto to Marvel movies. Video game designers, fashion photographers, and filmmakers still mine its visual language. What critics saw as dangerous nonsense, audiences now celebrate as pure cinematic poetry. Inframan, 1975. Before Power Rangers, before Ultraman gained worldwide fame, there was Inframan.
That's Inframan!
Inframan! He's here!
China's first superhero spectacular and possibly the most energetic movie ever made. This Shaw Brothers. Production cramming martial arts, rubber monsters, laser battles, and enough explosions to level Hong Kong into 90 minutes of pure adrenaline. Danny Lee stars as the title character, a scientist transformed into a chrome-suited superhero to battle Princess Dragon Mom and her army of bizarre creatures. The film features non-stop action. Buildings explode every 5 minutes, monsters shoot lasers from their eyes, and our hero literally punches through mountains. Critics had no idea what to make of Inframan. Western reviewers called it incomprehensibly frantic, cheaply made, and utterly ridiculous. The rubber monster suits were mocked, the constant explosions were dismissed as sensory overload, and the breakneck pacing was seen as poor filmmaking rather than intentional style.
That looks promising. Give me a...
But Inframan was never meant for contemplative viewing. It was designed as pure kinetic entertainment. Every frame bursts with creativity and enthusiasm. The monster designs are genuinely imaginative, the action sequences are expertly choreographed, and the whole production radiates joy in its own absurdity. Modern audiences recognize Inframan as a landmark of tokusatsu cinema and a masterclass in high-energy filmmaking. It's influenced everything from modern superhero movies to video game design. Sometimes the best art is the kind that refuses to slow down long enough for you to question it. Moonraker, 1979. When Star Wars made $1 billion, Every franchise in Hollywood wanted a piece of the space action, including James Bond. The result was Moonraker, a film that literally shot 07 into orbit and somehow managed to make outer space feel as silly as possible. Roger Moore returns as Bond, this time facing off against Hugo Drax, a villain whose plan to repopulate Earth from a space station makes most comic book plots look subtle. The film features everything from gondola hovercraft chases through Venice to laser battles in zero gravity, plus a henchman named Jaws who can survive atmospheric re-entry. Critics were merciless. They called it the most ridiculous Bond film ever made, a shameless Star Wars ripoff, and the point where the franchise jumped the shark. The space sequences were mocked as cheap science fiction, and the plot was dismissed as completely absurd. Many considered it the death of serious spy cinema, but Moonraker's embrace of complete absurdity is precisely what makes it entertaining. It's Bond as pure, escapist fantasy, unbound by any requirements of realism or logic. The space battles are genuinely spectacular, the production design is lavish, and Moore delivers one-liners with perfect comic timing throughout increasingly impossible situations. Modern Bond fans have come to appreciate Moonraker as the ultimate turn-your-brain-off entry in the series. It's regularly cited as a guilty pleasure masterpiece, and its influence can be seen in later over-the-top action franchises. Sometimes the best spy movies are the ones that forget to take themselves seriously. The Giant Spider Invasion, 1975. What happens when you give a Wisconsin filmmaker $500,000 and tell him to make a monster movie? You get The Giant Spider Invasion, a film so gloriously ridiculous that one of its main monsters is literally a Volkswagen Beetle covered in black fur and spider legs. Director Bill Rebane somehow convinced actors Steve Brody and Barbara Hale to appear in this tale of extraterrestrial arachnids terrorizing small-town America. The special effects include obvious rubber spiders, unconvincing miniatures, and that infamous Volkswagen spider that looks exactly like what it is, a car pretending to be a bug. Contemporary critics were merciless. Variety called it an insult to both spiders and audiences, while other reviews ranged from unwatchably amateurish to the worst creature feature ever made. It was widely considered the bottom of the barrel for drive-in horror. But that sincerity is precisely why it works. Unlike modern B-movies that wink at their own badness, The Giant Spider Invasion commits completely to its absurd premise. The actors deliver their lines with straight-faced conviction. The director clearly believes in his rubber monsters, and the result is accidentally hilarious in the most endearing way possible. Mystery Science Theater 3000 famously featured the film, introducing it to a whole new generation of bad movie lovers. Today, it's a staple of midnight movie screenings and cult film festivals, proving that sometimes the most memorable monsters are the ones made from spare car parts. Cleopatra Jones, 1973. What happens when you cross a supermodel with a federal agent and give her a karate black belt? You get Cleopatra Jones. 6 feet of attitude in platform boots, taking on drug dealers with style that makes fashion magazines look conservative. Tamara Dobson stars as the title character, a government agent who destroys poppy fields by day and battles crime bosses in fabulous outfits by night. The film throws her against Shelley Winters as a drug queenpin, resulting in fights that are equal parts martial arts and fashion show. Every scene features more costume changes than most musicals. Critics dismissed it as pure exploitation, style over substance, and a ridiculous attempt to cash in on blaxploitation trends. The action sequences were called poorly choreographed, and the plot was seen as an excuse to string together fight scenes and wardrobe changes. It was considered bottom-tier drive-in fare, but Cleopatra Jones was pioneering in ways critics didn't recognize. It featured a strong black female protagonist who was equally comfortable with high fashion and high kicks, creating a template that influenced everything from video games to modern action heroines. The style wasn't superficial, it was the substance. Today, Cleopatra Jones is celebrated as an essential feminist action film and a masterpiece of 70s design. Fashion historians study its costumes, and action directors cite its influence on modern female-led action cinema. What seemed like shallow exploitation was actually groundbreaking representation.
The vast speedway, people line the street.
Death Race 2000, 1975. It's 1975 and someone just pitched a movie about a cross-country race where drivers score points by murdering pedestrians. Sounds like a career-ending disaster, right? Well, that someone was Roger Corman, and that disaster was Death Race 2000. David Carradine stars as Frankenstein, a scarred speed demon in leather, while a young Sylvester Stallone chews scenery as Machine Gun Joe Viterbo.
Machine Gun Joe Viterbo!
A psychotic driver with more ammunition than acting ability. The premise? America has become a totalitarian state where the annual death race serves as the ultimate reality TV spectacle, complete with point systems for different types of human roadkill.
Pick up that flag, young man.
It's time for action.
It is not a time for violence.
Critics in 1975 were absolutely horrified. The New York Times called it sickening, while other reviewers dismissed it as morally bankrupt exploitation garbage and the death of cinema itself. Box office. It barely earned back its shoestring budget, and many theaters refused to screen it. But here's the twist. That moral outrage was exactly the point. Produced for just $300,000, Death Race 2000 wasn't trying to be subtle. It was a razor-sharp satire of American violence, media obsession, and political corruption, wrapped in B-movie mayhem. Think Black Mirror meets Fast and Furious, but made by people who actually understood what they were criticizing. Today, Death Race 2000 is considered a masterpiece of subversive cinema. Film schools teach it as essential viewing, and its influence can be seen in everything from The Hunger Games to Grand Theft Auto. Not bad for a movie that was supposedly the end of civilization.
Two men on a dream vacation.
What the hell are they doing?
Race with the Devil, 1975. Take two couples on a peaceful RV vacation. Add a satanic cult in the Texas desert. Throw in high-speed chases, occult terror, and Peter Fonda looking perpetually confused. The result? Race with the Devil. A movie that couldn't decide if it wanted to be Easy Rider, The Exorcist, or Smokey and the Bandit. Peter Fonda and Warren Oates play vacationing friends who accidentally witness a human sacrifice while camping. What follows is a paranoid thriller where our heroes realize the entire town, maybe the entire state, is part of a devil-worshipping conspiracy. Cue 90 minutes of RV chase sequences and mounting dread. Critics were baffled. The film seemed to be three different movies fighting for screen time. Horror fans wanted more occult scares. Action fans wanted more car chases, and everyone wanted better character development. It was dismissed as confused, poorly paced, and neither scary nor exciting. But audiences have since recognized Race with the Devil as a perfect encapsulation of 1970s paranoia cinema. It captures that post-Watergate, post-Vietnam feeling that maybe everyone really is out to get you. The genre blending that confused critics now feels innovative, and that relentless sense of dread actually works better because you never know what kind of movie you're watching. Modern horror directors cite it as an influence, and it's gained recognition as an underrated gem of American paranoid thriller cinema. Sometimes confusion creates its own kind of terror.
For 8 years.
For myself, I'd like to say that the whole experience...
Rolling Thunder, 1977. Our final film is perhaps the most complex on this list. Rolling Thunder stars William Devane as Major Charles Rain, a Vietnam POW who returns home after 7 years of torture, only to have his family murdered by criminals. What follows is a methodical tale of revenge that's more character study than action thriller. Written by Paul Schrader, Taxi Driver, and featuring Tommy Lee Jones in an early role, this should have been a prestige picture. Instead, it was too dark, too violent, and too psychologically complex for mainstream audiences. The protagonist's emotional numbness alienated viewers expecting a traditional revenge story. Critics were divided but largely dismissive. Many called it too violent, emotionally cold, and commercially unviable. 20th Century Fox reportedly dumped the film due to its extreme content, and it barely received a theatrical release. It seemed destined for obscurity. But Rolling Thunder found its audience through midnight screenings and VHS rentals. The film's unflinching examination of PTSD and trauma resonated with viewers ready for more complex protagonists. That emotional numbness wasn't a flaw. It was the entire point. Today, Rolling Thunder is considered a masterpiece of American cinema. Quentin Tarantino named his distribution company after it, and film scholars recognize it as an essential post-Vietnam War film. It's regularly cited as one of the best revenge thrillers ever made. proving that sometimes audiences need time to catch up with visionary filmmaking. Message from Space, 1978. When Star Wars conquered the world in 1977, every country wanted their own space opera. Japan's answer was Message from Space, a film so aggressively weird that it makes The Empire Strikes Back look like a documentary. This Shaw Brothers production throws everything at the screen: flying wooden ships, laser swords, space samurai, a villain who looks like a metallic peacock, and enough neon lighting to power Tokyo. American actors Vic Morrow and Sonny Chiba anchor a cast that seems to be acting in entirely different movies, possibly different decades. Western critics laughed it out of theaters. Reviews called it a shameless Star Wars ripoff, incomprehensibly plotted, and an assault on the senses. The dialogue was mocked, the effects were dismissed as cheap imitations, and the cultural elements were completely misunderstood by American audiences. But that cultural misunderstanding reveals the film's true brilliance. Message from Space isn't trying to copy Star Wars. It's reimagining space opera through the lens of Japanese mythology and samurai cinema. Those wooden ships aren't cheap effects. They're references to traditional Japanese aesthetics. The over-the-top performances aren't bad acting. They're kabuki-influenced theatrical styles. Today, cult film enthusiasts celebrate Message from Space as a psychedelic masterpiece. It's regularly screened at fantastic film festivals, and its influence can be seen in modern anime and manga. What seemed like confused imitation was actually confident cultural fusion.
Deals with me.
Black Belt Jones, 1974. Take one martial arts superstar, add a ridiculous plot about mobsters trying to take over a karate school, throw in a climactic fight scene in a car wash, and you've got Black Belt Jones, a film that proves sometimes the best action movies are the ones that embrace their own absurdity. Jim Kelly, fresh from Enter the Dragon, stars as the title character who must protect a dojo from mafia thugs using every martial arts technique imaginable. The fights feature exaggerated sound effects that make every punch sound like a gunshot, slow-motion sequences that stretch single kicks into epic moments, and enough funk music to power a small city. Critics called it poorly made, badly acted, and a cheap cash grab trying to capitalize on Kung Fu fever. The over-the-top sound effects were mocked. The plot was dismissed as nonsensical, and the action sequences were seen as more comedy than excitement. It was relegated to the bottom half of drive-in double features. But that commitment to pure entertainment is exactly what makes Black Belt Jones work. It's martial arts as pure kinetic joy, unencumbered by serious themes or realistic consequences. Every fight is choreographed for maximum impact. Every one-liner is delivered with perfect timing, and that car wash finale is genuinely inspired lunacy. Modern action fans celebrate Black Belt Jones as a masterclass in fun filmmaking. It's influenced countless martial arts comedies and remains a staple of midnight movie screenings. Sometimes the most effective action films are the ones that remember action should be, above all, exciting.
Taking hold of these, please.
The Indians were restless, and the villains were
The Villain, 1979. Think if Wile E. Coyote was played by Kirk Douglas, Roadrunner was Arnold Schwarzenegger, and the whole thing was directed by someone who'd clearly watched too many cartoons. That's The Villain, a live-action Looney Tunes episode that somehow convinced major Hollywood stars to participate in its madness. Kirk Douglas plays Cactus Jack Slade, a bumbling outlaw whose elaborate schemes to rob handsome stranger, Schwarzenegger, consistently backfire in spectacular ways. Anne Margaret provides the love interest, though her primary function seems to be surviving wardrobe malfunctions and pratfalls. The result is 90 minutes of fourth wall-breaking slapstick that treats the Old West like a Warner Brothers cartoon. Critics were appalled. They called it a waste of serious talent, painfully unfunny, and an insult to both westerns and comedy. The film's cartoon logic was seen as juvenile, and its slapstick was dismissed as outdated. It bombed at the box office and was quickly forgotten. But The Villain was attempting something genuinely experimental, translating animated comedy into live action without losing the source material's anarchic spirit. The pratfalls are perfectly timed, the sight gags are genuinely clever, and the commitment to cartoon physics is absolute. It's a one-of-a-kind film that refuses to be anything other than exactly what it is. Cult film enthusiasts have rediscovered The Villain as a unique comedy experiment. It's regularly featured at repertory screenings and has gained appreciation as an early example of meta-humor in Hollywood filmmaking. Sometimes the most original ideas are the ones that seem completely crazy.
You had to see me?
Paul Kersey.
Death Wish, 1974. What happens when you take a mild-mannered architect, destroy his family, and hand him a gun? You get Death Wish, a film that turned Charles Bronson into the patron saint of urban vigilantism and sparked one of the most controversial debates in 1970s cinema. Bronson plays Paul Kersey, a liberal New Yorker whose wife is murdered and daughter sexually assaulted by street thugs. His response? Prowl the streets at night, baiting criminals and executing them with cold precision. What starts as personal revenge becomes a one-man war on crime, complete with increasingly elaborate traps and shootouts. Critics were absolutely horrified. They called it fascist propaganda, morally reprehensible, and dangerous wish fulfillment for vigilante fantasies. The New York Times condemned it as vile, while other reviewers worried it would inspire real-world violence. Many theaters refused to screen it, and those that did often faced protests. But Death Wish tapped into genuine urban anxieties that critics were uncomfortable acknowledging. In an era of rising crime rates and perceived government ineffectiveness, audiences connected with Kersey's direct action approach. The film wasn't endorsing vigilantism. It was exploring the appeal of taking control when systems fail. Today, Death Wish is recognized as an essential artifact of 1970s urban paranoia cinema. Film scholars study it as a complex examination of violence, justice, and the appeal of simple solutions to complex problems. Its influence extends from action cinema to political discourse, proving that the most controversial films often reveal the most about their times. Duel. You're driving across the desert when a massive, faceless truck driver decides to kill you for no apparent reason, for 90 minutes. That's Duel, Steven Spielberg's TV movie debut that proved you don't need aliens, sharks, or dinosaurs to create pure terror. Sometimes a truck is enough. Dennis Weaver stars as David Mann, a businessman whose routine road trip becomes a nightmare when he passes a grimy tanker truck. What follows is automotive psychological warfare as the unseen driver systematically tries to murder Mann using increasingly creative vehicular attacks. No explanation, no backstory, just primal road rage elevated to mythic proportions. Critics initially dismissed it as just a TV movie, too simple for theatrical release, and a one-trick premise stretched too thin. When it was later released in theaters, many reviewers still saw it as a minor exercise in suspense, notable only as Spielberg's professional debut. It was considered competent but unremarkable filmmaking. But Duel's minimalist approach is precisely what makes it a masterpiece. With virtually no dialogue, no complex plot, and no character development, Spielberg strips thriller cinema down to its essential elements: pursuit, survival, and the terror of the unknown. It's Jaws on wheels, proving that the most effective monsters are often the most mysterious ones. Modern critics recognize Duel as one of the greatest thriller films ever made and a masterclass in visual storytelling. It's studied in film schools worldwide and regularly appears on best of lists. What seemed like a simple TV movie was actually a young master filmmaker discovering his voice through pure cinematic technique.
Deadly combination.
The Iger Sanction, 1975. Only Clint Eastwood could convince a studio to fund a movie where he plays an art professor who moonlights as an assassin and has to climb one of the world's most dangerous mountains to complete a hit. The Iger Sanction takes itself completely seriously, which makes it unintentionally hilarious. Eastwood directs himself as Dr. Jonathan Hemlock, a scholar forced out of retirement for one last job that requires him to scale the deadly Iger Mountain. The film features elaborate climbing sequences, convoluted spy plots, and romantic subplots that feel like they belong in a completely different movie. It's macho posturing elevated to art form. Critics were baffled by the film's tonal inconsistencies. They called it pretentious, oddly paced, and unsure what genre it wants to be. The climbing sequences were praised for their technical achievement but criticized for overwhelming the spy plot. Most reviews suggested the film was trying too hard to be everything at once. But the Iger Sanction's bizarre genre blending creates its own unique entertainment value. It's simultaneously a serious mountaineering documentary, a ridiculous spy thriller, and an unintentional comedy about academic life. Eastwood's complete commitment to the absurd premise makes every scene fascinating to watch. Cult film enthusiasts have discovered the Iger sanction as a unique entry in Eastwood's filmography and a fascinating example of 70s genre experimentation. It's regularly featured at repertory screenings as an example of what were they thinking? Cinema that somehow works despite itself. These unforgettable 70s movies prove that the best 70s action movies weren't always the most respected ones. From drive-in cinema gems to wild 70s movies that defined exploitation films, these cult classics remind us why 1970s movie nostalgia runs so deep. Whether you're discovering forgotten 70s movies or revisiting iconic 70s action favorites, these crazy 70s films capture the must-see 70s action spirit perfectly. These aren't just bad action movies. They're 1970s cult classics that transformed so bad they're good into an art form. Sometimes the most classic action movies are the weird 70s movies that dared to be different. Which of these retro action movies would you most want to experience on the big screen? And what other so bad it's good movies from the decade deserve recognition? Share your thoughts in the comments, and remember to subscribe for more deep dives into 70s cult films and the beautiful disasters of cinema history.